And the annual summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is all set to be held today in Tajikistan's capital. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will lead the Indian delegation at the 21st meeting of the SCO. Prime Minister Modi is expected to raise the issue of terrorism in the presence of Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan while addressing the much-awaited summit. Modi will address the leaders virtually, while India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar will attend the summit in person. This is the fourth such summit where India will be participating as a fully fledged member of the SCO. India is also expected to raise the issues of counter-terrorism and current political and humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. The Foreign Minister of India has arrived in Dushanbe ahead of the summit. Dr. S. Jaishankar was received by the President of Tajikistan. They held talks on developments of Afghanistan and the impact on regional security. He also met with the Foreign Minister of Tajikistan, Sirajuddin Muridin, after a short photo op session with the President. Dr. S. Jaishankar has also held talks with Chinese counterpart Wang Yi to discuss disengagement process in border areas in Ladakh. The border standoff between India and Chinese militaries erupted in the month of May last year following the violent clashes in the Galwan Valley. Each side currently has around 60,000 troops along the highly sensitive area of an actual control. Meanwhile, Prime Minister of Pakistan Imran Khan along with his Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi have arrived in Dushanbe to attend the Heads of the State Summit in person ahead of the Heads of Summits on Friday. That is today. The Prime Minister of Pakistan sat down for multiple bilateral talks. The first leader he met was the President of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. The two leaders greeted each other with a hug followed by a short photo op session. The SCO summit is a heads of state meeting between the 8-member Shanghai Cooperation Organization has already completed 21 years since its inception. Its member states are China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, India and Pakistan. This year's SCO summit is the first meeting of heads of state since the Taliban takeover of Kabul. All eyes will be on the Afghan representatives at the meeting. Afghanistan has had an observer status and has been striving for full membership of the organization, but there is no clarity as of yet if any representatives from the Taliban would be attending the summit. Now, at the time when most of the countries are also part of different other blocs, so what purpose does the SCO serve? The main objectives of the SCO are to strengthen relations among member states, promote cooperation in political affairs, economic and trade, and also help in safeguarding regional peace and stability. India has pushed itself hard to secure a permanent place in the bloc in order to counter China's growing presence and build a strong foothold in the entire Central Asian nation. Now, for more on this, we have our diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, joining us live from New Delhi. Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us. Let's just begin by talking about some of the key areas of discussions. I did mention a few. Could you just lay that out for us?
Well, the two key focus during this year's summit, which is all set to begin, we know that the leaders have started to arrive. A short while ago, the Indian External Affairs Minister arrived at the summit venue. The Indian delegation is already present there. If we talk about the two key outcomes, one, of course, is Afghanistan. As you mentioned, this is happening in the backdrop of the Afghan crisis. And remember, when it comes to SCO grouping, many countries share border with Afghanistan, and two countries which are part of SCO, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, which are Central Asian countries, they are worried about the refugee influx into their countries because they share land border with Afghanistan. And we know that the Tajik side is not very happy with the ongoing developments in Afghanistan. They do not see an inclusive government in Afghanistan, but that is the case globally. But what makes Tajikistan a separate case is because there is a huge Tajik minority in Afghanistan, and the Tajiks don't see they being part of the Afghan government. The second, of course, is the expansion of the SCO grouping. From this year, there will be a formal process to expand the grouping, and the Iranian president, the foreign minister, are there in Dushanbe for this very purpose, because the grouping will be expanded and the legal processes will start from this year's summit, which is due to start shortly. Of course, we know Iranians have had multiple bilaterals with the Indian External Affairs Minister, who is present in person. Both the foreign ministers had their first in-person meeting. The Iranian president had a 10 minutes long bilateral with the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, and during that conversation he specifically mentioned about the need to have an inclusive government in Kabul, and we know that recently the Iranians weren't very happy with the developments in Afghanistan, particularly related to Panjshir, where there are reports of a Pakistani involvement.
Right, Siddhant. Also, another point that I'd mentioned earlier, and just for more clarity on this, the Indian side has already held some part of the bilateral discussions on the developments of Afghanistan and the impact on regional security. Now, of course, that may be a major key point here. What can we expect on that front, and is there any clarity on what has been discussed so far?
Well, so far the Indian External Affairs Minister, who arrived in the national capital of Tajikistan yesterday, had multiple bilaterals with the Tajik foreign minister, with the Iranian foreign minister, with the Chinese foreign minister, and we have seen the readout from the bilateral by the Indian side, in which the Indian External Affairs Minister has talked about the disengagement and line of actual control, talked about the need for further disengagement. Remember, there are two areas, Gogra and Hot Springs, which haven't seen disengagement happening so far. There has been other areas where there has been disengagement where it has happened, especially the Pangong Lake. But talking about the key focus of the visit, of course, it will be the contact group, the SCO Afghanistan contact group that will be meeting, in which the Indian External Affairs Minister is going to participate. There will be a special session at the SCO summit has been on Afghanistan, and of course the Indian Prime Minister addressing the meeting. This is a summit that is happening in a very hybrid model in terms of the participation. Leaders like India, China and Russia are participating virtually, while leaders of countries like of Pakistan and Central Asian countries are participating in person.
Right, Siddhant. Also, like you mentioned, all eyes will be on Afghanistan representatives at the meeting. Is there any clarity on that?
Well, so far it looks like there is no presence of Afghan side at the SCO meeting. We know that Afghanistan is an observer member country, but we can also understand that this is a difficulty that many groupings are going to face in near future. The next big worry or perhaps a problem will be faced by the SAARC grouping next week, because remember, on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly, there is an annual SAARC foreign ministers meeting, and this is a very heated affair in terms of both the Pakistani and the Indian foreign ministers present in the same room, and we have seen how there have been skirmishes, to use the word, but largely SAARC will be facing difficulties in terms, first, will there be a hybrid model of the foreign ministers meeting, because foreign ministers of countries like Bhutan are not participating, and then of course what happens to Afghanistan, because remember, Afghanistan is also a member of SAARC, and it's up to Nepal to take the final call as to who represents. So similar problem in the SCO as well, but so far it looks like that there is no representation from the Afghan government. But one thing I can tell you is that if the Ghani government would have survived the onslaught, whatever has happened in Afghanistan, then President Ashraf Ghani would have represented his country. He had already given the confirmation as well.
Right, Siddhant. All right, Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us with all the latest on that. We will, of course, continue to monitor this very closely. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.